You're listening to Were You Still Talking? Hey, welcome back. You are listening to Were You Still Talking? Again, this is Joel Albrecht, and in my studio today, I have an author and a financier and a writer. I said writer. And someone who's done a lot of things. His day job has been to help create over 1,100 jobs while funding, financing, building, and exiting 3 digital media companies. Prior to that, he was a venture principal at Capital Express, hosted MoneyHunt on PBS. I really want to find out about that. That was pre-Shark Tank. Led over 1,500 people across 14 miles of open sea kayak and trekked 1,100 miles through the deserts of Saudi, Jordan, and Syria. And I think, maybe that influenced the book just a little bit. We're going to get into it. Miles, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate you. Great having you here.
Joel, thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to your audience.
So I had another person that I knew growing up who hiked, I think, almost 1,100 miles of the Pacific Crest Trail. And one of the questions I had for him, and I have for you as well. Well, one, did you do all that at once? Was that all at the same time? It was
a one-shot deal. I want to be very specific. I use the word trek. You use the word hike. So we did this on foot and camel and horse. And we had Toyota FJ Land Cruisers in support. So trekking and hiking could be 2 different things. We didn't put 1,100 miles on the soles of our shoes, but we accomplished the trip all back to back, 26 days. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is different, but still an amazing feat. Because my question was going to be, what kind of shoes did you wear? But even trekking, you must go through it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
People ask, what's the most important part of equipment, right? And we might get into equipment later, but your feet have to be happy. And so they were Merrell high top trek shoes at the time. I have switched now to Salomon Xterras, which are good for a variety of purposes, including standing up doing podcasts. But the feet have to be happy. That's probably the most important piece of equipment.
Yeah, I would think so, because that's true just about any time. I mean, even, I just do walks every day, and I definitely need good shoes. It's important. It makes a difference. It just sounds fascinating to me. I love hearing about journeys like that. And when was that? Was that before you did the show? During? After? Last
significantly
week?
After. So yeah, it wasn't nor was it last week. It was inspired by the events last year, but going into the Wayback Machine, I hosted MoneyHunt on public television during the .com boom. So this is late 90s. We started in a little cable studio in Norwalk, Connecticut. I had watched Wayne's World, like Wayne and Garth. Remember that movie?
Oh, yeah. I'm old enough.
Cable access, right? Well, I found out for $500 you could get 3 cameras and a studio, and they had to give it to you because that was part of their deal for community service. So we took it. We did this show, and it ended up in the hands of Hollywood exec who had me out and said, like, this is how to do it. And within 6 months, and remember, there was the accelerant in the market of .com. But within 6 months, we were in 230 stations in the United States and 16 countries overseas with a show that was basically 30 minutes, 2 entrepreneurs pitching their ideas. And so, yes, that was a long, long time ago. And I didn't get to give long answers like I get to give on your show. Big difference. Everything was 30 seconds. We were on to the next. And I do really enjoy longer form because I get to tell stories. But after 9/11, I was trying to, look, I'm a simple guy from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, right? So I'm trying to piece together, like, what happened? I've always been a curious kid. I've always been a curious adult. Like, why? Who are these people? What were they thinking? Why were they so mad? And it was really wasn't getting very many answers that I was happy with. So I read a book. I read a lot of books, but I read one called Seven Pillars of Wisdom by T.E. Lawrence. It's 100 years old, and it is his book about how he led the Arab Revolt, 1917, 1918, which was a promise that the colonial empires, the British, had made to the Bedouins, the Arabs that lived in that corner of Arabia. It wasn't Saudi Arabia yet. It's called the Hejaz. And he said, like, hey, if you help us unseat the Turks, you can have all of this, generally waving their hands. Here's some gold coins. Well, his understanding of those people in leading that revolt is probably the greatest understanding by a Western mind of the Bedouin or Arab psychology I've ever seen. And so I finished the book. Obviously, this is also the basis of Lawrence of Arabia, the famous movie. Although Peter O'Toole was 6'5" and T. Lawrence was probably 5'5".
Yeah.
Camera angles are magic, right? So I finished the book, and a good friend of mine, Wells Jones, was traveling through town. He said, "Hey, what are you reading?" I said, "I just finished Seven Pillars." He said, "So did I." So what do you think? And I said, "Well, I think he's the first and only man from the West that's understood the Bedouins and the Arabs in a way that we just never have." And of course, Wells says, "So what do we do next?" Let's go.
Oh,
So
nice.
that was the
Yeah.
unique answer, right? So I was fortunate enough at the time from my time at MoneyHunt as well to have written a book that was a little bit popular. So the YPO, Young Presidents Organization of Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, invited me to speak about my book. There's not that many books at the time in Saudi Arabia from Western authors, by the way. And so I guess I did okay. And they said, that was fantastic. What else would you like? And we said, matter of fact, we'd like to hike, trek 1,100 miles through your deserts in Jordan and Syria, following the path of T.E. Lawrence. They said, Lawrence. He's still 100 years later. He's a big hero.
Wow. Wow.
And they said, well, what can we do to help? And at that moment, we were inside the tent, right? They had decided that we were somebody that they trusted and they wanted to help. And so that was the support and the guidance and the direction for our journey. And 1,100 miles later, we arrived in Damascus, Syria, just on the heels of the prior civil war. But we got to see it all. And then continued on through Israel and got to see a different perspective of the region from different group of people. So that was the trek. It's 26 days. It was a little over 1,000 miles. And when we returned, I was fortunate enough through my agent to get in contact with a Broadway producer who wanted to write a script loosely based on our adventures. I didn't know this, but Broadway scripts take a long time.
I guess it depends on, unless you're writing Hamilton, apparently. But yes.
I mean, I've raised a few kids while this script is been worked on. But in any event, October 7th of now, not last year, so there'll be 2023 came along, and that was a horrific day. But I also acknowledge that what was perhaps even more horrific was October 8th and what happened afterwards. And I turned to Wells and I said, like, great Broadway play, that'd be fun, but it's not really based on our experience. It's now gone off into a different world of Broadway plays. Well, why don't we get two bites of the apple and write the book? And so we did. And as you know, the book is loosely based on myself and Wells' experience in Saudi, Jordan, Syria, and Israel. And experience is a really important word there, um, because every media outlet, depending on where it is, can have a different tilt and stilt to what's going on and what's gone on there. So we have our experience,
Oh,
and
right,
that's what
right.
we talk
Yeah.
about. And it's fairly unassailable because that's what we experienced. And that's what we set out to share with the book. It's been really,
So the
yeah.
amazing thing about that story to me is the journey is incredible. The fact that they wanted you there in the first place, you know, having those experiences. But the other incredible thing is that you're still friends after 1,100 miles trekking across the desert. So you must be really strong. It's a pretty strong bond.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Wells and I met 25 years ago. We actually technically met in church.
Hmm.
And so practice the same religion. But he's one of those guys that just the first day you meet him, you've been lifelong friends. And that was pretty neat. He has a military background. He's Navy ex parachute rescue special force, retired. And I mean, I like to say I grew up in a military family, which is basically my grandfather was military. My father was raised in a military family, and so he took it out on us, the grandkids. And so very, very simpatico, very the definition of watching each other's back
Hmm.
and complementary skills. And the nice thing is I'm not married to him, so at the end of the trek, we can go our own separate ways and then decide to have an adventure sometime
That yeah, it
down the
always makes
road.
it easier, doesn't
Maybe
it?
that's a better definition of marriage, but
That's yeah.
yes, we were in close quarters frequently, but we also had I don't want to say a mission, that sounds too formal,
Hmm.
but we had a purpose, and we were both very serious about that purpose and accomplishing that. So that formed a bond that really continues to this day.
That is awesome. And how, my next question, and I was going to ask this anyway, how long did it take then, when you decided to write the book? How long did it take you to write the book? And did you like write separately and then come together, or did you actually sit in a room together and hash it out, or a little bit of both, maybe?
I think the first point would be, for me, a great way to write a book is to think about it for 15 years.
Well, yeah, sure.
So, so
You can't, that can't be wrong. There's no
uh,
deadline. Well, there's kind of deadlines on writing books
right,
because, we're not infinite, but
that's right.
yeah, at least in
So,
this
so that was
lifetime.
number one.
Yeah.
Number two was that it is historical fiction. So that cuts down on the historical precision of research, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's helpful as a choice, right? It could have been straight up fiction, I suppose, but all of the history is, is accurate, right? And the recreation of our trek is accurate. We just kind of meld the two together. And I am the storyteller. So I
Okay.
write with this big arc that is just like, we're going to start here and we're going to end there. And, these are all the points we're going to hit along the way. And I realized in Seven Pillars of Wisdom, there's a very specific map of where he went and when. And this is what we recreated, both with our own feet in the trek, but also in the book. So that gives us great structure to proceed ever northward on our journey along this same trek. So the structure was, hey, we need a story for Yenbu. Hey, we need a story for well, it's called Taif. It's outside of Mecca. Westerners don't get into Mecca. We need a story for Jeddah. We need it. So we kind of just moved right up along the line. That made it easier. And then Wells, I think Hemingway said, all first drafts are shit. So I probably come in under the wire on that. And Wells's first function very much is like, hey, that doesn't sound real, and we would never do that. We might do this.
Hmm.
And so we basically mop up the first draft with this massive discussion of like, how would you play this? How would you play that, etc. And then we have a handful, well, we had on this one, we now have a handful of, let me just call them early unofficial editors, friends,
Hmm.
that would read it and say, like, you didn't need that chapter. You didn't need that. That didn't add anything. Where were you going with that? I always wondered why this, but not that. You never really answered that question, etc. But that entire process, we began in November and we hit publish in March.
Wow. That's fast,
60,000.
but you just told me why. I mean, I talked to a fair amount of authors and filmmakers, documentary filmmakers, and having that plan like that is huge. It's huge. I know a lot of people just sit down at a typewriter, start writing,
Yeah,
and
no.
usually that's a novelist though, not a
Right.
historical fiction. So
Right.
if it's historical, you can't really do that, but. It is really interesting. And the other thing that I was thinking of while you were saying that is, are there things that didn't make the book? Are there things that are like, people won't even believe this?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were things that it happened,
Hmm.
but um, there is no real way for two manly men like Wells and I to explain a Turkish bath in Damascus after 20 days in the desert and the things that are available to you in said bathhouse. And
Uh,
there's no description of that wouldn't lead you down a path that you just don't to travel. So, yeah, it's a few of those. Um, I'm happy to say I comported myself just fine, but you know, uh, that's a different book. Yeah, there are also some episodes. For whatever reason, bodily injury seems to visit upon myself with a lot of uh, frequency. It's like small stuff, like stitches and cuts and abrasions and whatnot. And so there were times where I had sewed myself up.
hmm
There were things that just the gruesome detail just wasn't necessary.
Well, a little of that is in the book. Um, I got through the first bit. I meant to
Mm-hmm.
get more, but I wanted to do the podcast as well. And um, the part about the bull run is
Magnus
that
takes one on the calf. Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
mine is actually on my knee, not my calf, but
Okay.
I just thought that would be easier. Didn't have to talk about it all too much. There, and furthermore, me individually, I mean, Wells and I both ran with bulls in Pamplona. Okay?
Hmm.
Um, uh, there were some others that weren't as fortunate along the route, especially on the rookie side, which is called Mercaderis. It's very straight, but the first timers are there, and they fall a lot.
Right.
And it's one thing to be hit by a bull
Yeah.
from behind, right? It's you versus the bull, right? But it's one thing that tripping over some dude that's hung over in Mercaderis and then getting it from the bull, not my style. So we ran in the first part, but there were some folks that uh, and in the bull ring, um, yeah, I'm just very happy we made the choices that we did. And they say about the bull ring, I don't know if I include this in the book or not, but if you run quickly enough, look, you're never going to beat the bulls into the ring, but you can run quickly enough and get in with the steers. And there are probably 1,000 people in the ring when they close the doors, and there are 25,000 people up in the stands, right? And now the bull runs over for the day, and the big bulls, they're in their pen, they're having their last meal, they're enjoying life, and they're not going to bring them out until the evening's festivities. But they're going to have they're going to have some fun.
Yeah, yeah.
So they turn loose these little guys with very sharp horns, and you can't see. I mean, the only way you know one of the little guys is coming at you is you see people peeling away suddenly with this look on their face. And when the last one peels away, there's only one more look, but the set of eyes is not human, and it has two large horns. People really, really get beat up in the bull ring.
Uh-huh.
And what we promised ourselves was, if we make it through the running of the bulls, especially on Ayuntamiento and the places that we chose, there's no honor in getting gored in the ring, right? It's, that's for the kids. So we did the good part, right?
Uh-huh.
And we got in the ring, and I was up spectating soon enough. Just wasn't worth it.
That is one of those activities that I totally get. It's an adrenaline kind of thing. I get why people would want to do it. It's never been on my bucket list. I will jump out of a plane, perfectly good airplane, and float to the ground. But no, I never thought that would be a fun thing to do. Also, largely because of what you're describing, because of everyone else there is to trip over and stuff. I think I could run ahead of a bull and then let him pass me, but I would be too freaked out, I think, by all the other people there going nuts. How many times have you done that activity? It sounds like you've done it a lot.
Just one and done.
One and done.
Like everything else. Well, when my kids are of age, my goal is to do it one more time.
Okay.
But I think this is a theme throughout our adventures, and that is we're curious enough to think, hey, I wonder if I could do that, right?
Right.
We are serious about the research, and so we're well prepared. In this particular case, we met with Dennis Clancy, who's the man on the horns. He is like the instructor to the stars of running with the bulls. Oh. And we meet him 5 o'clock in the morning, go through the routes. Basically, we have a strategy. Mm-hmm. Of course, like Mike Tyson says, everybody has a plan until they get hit in the face. But
yeah,
at least
I would do that before I'd run with the bulls. I would step in the ring and get hit by Mike Tyson once.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, once. That's it. One punch.
That was fun.
One punch. Right.
I don't care if it's 58. That's not going to work out.
But we had the confidence of being well prepared, and that goes for a better bull run. It goes for a better trek. It goes for a better adventure rather than just wandering in and saying, I wonder how this is going to work out. It never really works out.
No, it doesn't. And that's true with writing a book, with producing a TV show, whatever it is. That's how I stepped into the podcast, but I've learned a lot. It's not the way to go. Because it's, I was doing this kind of before podcasts got big, or what people think is big. Podcast is still, compared to just about any other form of media, is still very small market. And a lot of people get into it. I guess if you make it past 10, you're doing really well.
Okay.
I was like, wow. But anyway, I stepped into it without sufficient planning, and with the idea that, with the original idea that, anybody can do a podcast, which is true. It's true, but not anyone can do a good podcast.
There you go.
Having good guests is a huge, huge part of it. Um, oh, yes, the open sea kayak adventure. Tell me a little about that. Where was that? You did 14 miles across open sea in a
Yeah,
kayak.
that is Long Island Sound.
Okay.
Myself and another adventuring partner, Scott Carlin, it was after.com crashed,
Mm-hmm.
and we're out for the first time really in kayak. Hey, can we get to the lighthouse? This is from Connecticut. Get to the lighthouse. And we look like, gosh, you think anybody's ever kayaked to Long Island from here? And it begins the curiosity, right? Well, I wonder what it would take. We would need food and phones and emergency plan and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we didn't really tell our wives at the time, but someone had dared us and bet us $50 that we couldn't do it. So okay, that's on. And we took sit on top kayaks at the time, not sea kayaks, but at the time sit on tops, which are brutally difficult. It's like paddling a bale of hay across Long Island Sound. So Long Island Sound is pretty tempestuous body of water. It kicks up quickly, and we're going across, and we sit on top kayaks, quite warm. Make it all the way, and we realized we didn't have a ride back.
Oh no!
So there's no Uber at the time. So we paddled back, and so you're 7 miles offshore in personal watercraft. That's kind of interesting. There was only two of us. We didn't have any escort boats or anything like that at the time. And so we got back to the bar, as you do. And he said, "Hey, this lady said she's not going to pay us on the bet," as you do. And someone in the bar says, like, "Hey, I would give you $100 to do that." And that happened 20 times. And we realized before we went home that night, gosh, we could have raised money for charity.
Oh, yeah.
And so the next year there were 8 of us. Next year there were 40. Next was 176. Then there's 375. We own our own fleet of now sea kayaks from Old Town in Maine. We use them once a year. And basically people sign up and guarantee that they'll raise X amount of money for the charities. And so they get a seat in one of the kayaks. And it became a big event. We had 300-400 kayakers, but also 300-400 volunteers. You had chase boats, you had sport, you had you name it. And what's interesting about running a charity is that you can't really give anybody a raise, and you can't really fire anybody. Yet all of the kayaks have to be on the other side of the water at 5 a.m. the morning of the event, and they all have to be matched to the individual height and weight of each one of the kayakers. So as they get off the buses and go on, they get in the right kayak, etc. So it's like a little Normandy invasion.
Oh yeah, it must be.
Yeah, it was wild.
Yeah.
And then after the 6th or 7th year, we started getting smart and putting a big party on the other side. So the kayakers
so they've got something to
rolled right
for.
into 5 hours of open bar and 5 bands. And I would say the best one was probably the Wailers, Bob Marley's old group. Donovan Frankenreiter's, Jack Johnson's buddy, played. We had Neville brothers. I think Aaron Neville just passed away, but it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And we raised a decent amount. It was a one-day event, but we'd hand out checks to charities totaling maybe $250,000 and pack it in for the day, wash out the kayaks, put them away in storage, and do it again next year. So I did that for 10 years, and Wells did that as well. But I say that we probably did a lifetime's worth of charity work in 10 years. And so we sold off the fleet, and we're done. But it was a good run. It was 10 fun years. But that is that's called Kayak for a Cause, and it was a blast. It was a cool chapter in my life. Wasn't a full-time job, just a one-day event, but we probably worked on it for 12 months.
I worked for my last job in the job market was working for a nonprofit lawyer, so I know what goes into nonprofits. You have a huge advantage being a businessman already. Most people go into it without really any knowledge that a nonprofit corporation is a corporation. And so I know there's a lot of work there, a lot of work, especially when you're doing something that big. It's huge. It is huge. So I think I'd be remiss if I don't ask this. Are you a fan of Lawrence of Arabia, the movie?
I love it.
Yeah.
Based on a true story, but I
Right.
think the important thing is that so many people know of it that it really does spread the message. And as I see it, the message is, look, hindsight's 2020, right? But colonial white men hanging out in clubs in London and Paris were probably not ideally suited to draw the lines in the sand of the Middle East, but they did. And they used Lawrence, and Lawrence used them
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
to get what they wanted, which at the end of the day, look, I mean, there's religious overtones, there's geopolitical overtones. At the time the Suez Canal ran through there, that was important. But oil was beginning to pop up. And who gets it was really interesting, especially
Right.
to the Western.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's funny because I always thought the movie was about having the best photographer and a really good actor and an amazing director, and you can make a movie. No.
Well, yeah, what's the great scene with
I think you
the
got more out of
lighting?
it.
Yeah, the lighting of the match and having that dissolve into the wide panorama of the desert with the sun setting or rising. I don't recall which. Look, there's no help from AI or CGI or anything else. I mean,
Right.
they shot that
Right.
themselves. And it, boy, if you watch Lord of the, I probably watch it 3 or 4 times a year still. Um, but if you watch that and have read Seven Pillars, and perhaps I might suggest, not on the same level, but A Line in the Sand, those three will really give you a better understanding of what's going on in the Middle East and why.
Mm-hmm.
It's not current events, right? But it, it serves us well to look back 100 years, and it serves us well to look back 1,000 years, because this place has been fought over for a long time.
I
Long, long
think
time.
that's a really good point. I mean, I don't even pretend to understand the Middle East, and as a Westerner, and I'm always scratching my head about things going on now, especially. But I think history is really important, and it would help anyone to look at it through that lens. I think a little more, get some understanding of the history there. Um, and there's far more history there than there is here. So that's hard for us to understand too, I think. I always think it sometimes it's hard for Westerners to get areas that are so much older than ours, at least the European portion of our North America.
Well, you lead me
It's
into an interesting
interesting.
story, if I might. If you remember shock and awe and weapons of mass destruction, right? That culminated in a hearing at the United Nations,
Hmm.
and Colin Powell was the one that was passing out the slideshow, right? And on the other side was Jacques Chirac, who's premier of France at the time, and his words were, "Look, you're a young nation. You don't understand. France has been in this part of the world for 1,000 years." And indeed, he was right. I mean, during the Crusades, it was, I mean, I hold that the original jihad what did not come from the West. It did not come from the Middle East. It came from the West. It came from Pope Clement in 1092, who basically declared the Crusades on, right? And said, like,
Right.
look, anybody you kill on the way to your pilgrimage to Jerusalem, it's fine by me. You're absolved in advance. Just basically, that's the playbook for jihad, right? And
Right.
so,
It
and it
sounds well, it
wasn't,
sounds like a
yeah,
similar story to our own history.
right?
It's
Just right, right. Oh,
they don't
yes.
matter. You can have
Oh,
that area.
yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And so there was a religious overtone to being, be saved, have meaning to your life, get to Jerusalem and mow them down on the way. And indeed, it was the Knights Templar that built the transportation system and the hospitality system.
Hmm.
And those are
Right.
the great castles of Craig Chevalier, Perak in Jordan, etc. And they were like pit stops for these pilgrims
Hmm.
that would give their land to the Knights Templar in France and have a debit card that they could punch all the way
Interesting.
all the
Interesting
way.
way to put it. Yeah. Yeah.
They basically that was Visa 1,000 years ago, right? And so they being Knights Templar, ended up probably the wealthiest landowners in France, which upset the king who was broke and the pope who was broke. So they had ways of taking it back. But those were built by the Crusaders, primarily from France and Germany.
I think about this sometimes when when we're seeing tours of these grand castles. Usually it's in England, and I think about what paid for those. It's like we admire those. So isn't that amazing? Look at all that billions of dollars worth of artwork, and I just think, how'd they get that?
Mm.
Where'd that come from?
There,
That's
there,
very
there,
interesting.
there are some. Well, it's interesting you say that as well. Wells and I have this thesis that there is within those castles, perhaps, a series of portraits that have something called the imperial gaze. And I mentioned how the
Oh yeah.
reuse of a line in the sand actually made us better. And one of them mentioned, I didn't imperial gaze. What's that? I went and looked it up, and it's the Lord of the Manor,
Hmm.
with his Irish setters and his fireplace, and there's a window looking out over this vast territories, and he's always looking down upon the people that are looking at the portrait. Right? There's always
Oh
this.
yeah, it's always hung way up
Yes, and
there. Yeah,
aren't you
yeah.
glad that I'm willing to provide for you and enlighten you, etc. It's called the imperial gaze. Well, that's become a thesis
Interesting.
for us, not just in this area. We know better than you. Let us handle it, right? But, it's happened in Cuba, it's happened in the Congo, it's happened in so many other places, India, that it's made for some interesting material for Wells and I in the future.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah, that how did they get this is an interesting question that most of the guides don't have an answer to.
Right. Or they certainly don't want to have an answer to, perhaps.
Right,
That's not something,
right.
well, we don't talk about that.
Well,
Come on. What do you mean? It's ridiculous. We don't need
right.
to talk about that. That's not important. It's interesting because, I mean, I was just thinking about all the social media stars who have that attitude now. What? We know better than you. And, there are some people like, I forgot his name. There's like a guy who's a dad, and he tells people like how to hammer a nail. Now that's useful. That's
It is
useful.
useful.
He
I
does,
think it's
but
called Hey
yeah.
Dad. I'm
Oh,
a
maybe that's
fan,
it. Maybe that's it.
and I think whether it's something happened to his parents when he was young, he didn't have a father to teach
Hmm.
him, how to make a fire and
Right.
how to split wood and how to etc. So he takes these menial, manly tasks and teaches at first his kid, but now he's got lots of followers. So I appreciate the fact that he may be providing something that other fathers are not providing today.
I appreciate it. I think that's a really cool thing because I am very, I forget that I had a dad and he taught me how to, change the spark plugs on a Volkswagen and hammer a nail and paint the house forever. That our house was always being painted. It was a perpetual job. It never ended. But I forget that there are lots of people who they don't have that. And I use YouTube for everything. But then it's the people who are trying to tell us what's real and what's not. And it's not always accurate. I mean, the most recent example is this. There's a picture of the Hollywood Hills burning and the Hollywood sign behind it. And it's complete fiction. That picture is someone just made that up and threw it up there. I was like, what? Anyway, the we know better than you thing. Yeah. I've never heard that expression before, but I like it. That's interesting.
I was surprised when it showed up in one of my book reviews. I'm like, what? It wasn't a particularly complimentary book review, but yeah, I got a silver lining out of it. I looked up Imperial Gaze.
Right. The thing about bad reviews, I have a very small YouTube channel and I just put out flight simulator videos and different things, but and podcasts. And when I start getting bad reviews, I know, this is hitting more people. Because most of them are complimentary because it's friends or, people I already know. If I start hitting, as people start putting up stuff that's mean and it always upsets me a little bit, but then I go, this means more people are watching it. This is great. All right. Thanks.
Hope you pay retail for the book. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's always, unfortunately, well, the more reviews, the better, probably, no matter what. And it's a good opportunity to say, the great Larry King once said, I was really surprised when he said this. He said, I never read the books of people who are coming on my show. Not that I'm comparing myself to Larry King, but he said, I never read the books because what if I don't like them? And I don't subscribe to that. I don't read the books usually because I don't have time. But I started reading your book, and I was really impressed. I thought, hey, this is great. This is well written. This is drawing me in immediately. The foreword was drawing me in. So yeah, impressive.
Well, for a book about thank you very much. For a book about the Middle East, that actually, Pamplona, it's the prologue.
Mm-hmm.
That was like 3 sentences in the first chapter. And one of our inner circle said, like, blow that into, like, you got to give me more of that. It's like, you met in Pamplona? And like, and that was it? Like, tell me more. So beginning in Pamplona, but the book ends up, so we have 2 proteges. One's a Jewish boy named Jeremy. One is Saudi Lebanese Arab named Abdu. And we meet, Jeremy is running with the bulls. Jeremy's grandmother is in Oxford. And so for a book about the Middle East, it actually, I would suggest any reader or listener, hang in there, because it starts in Barcelona. It goes from Oxford to London to Paris before it arrives in Beirut, Lebanon. So, you have 4 solid chapters before you get to the Middle East. But it's important because it sets the stage for what's going on there.
And when they make a movie about it, they'll cut all that anyway. It'll just start. So, you were talking about all of the versions of it. And it's good. It's good to say that for anyone who might be thinking of writing a book or a script. It's true. The first draft is probably not the best, and unless you happen to be one of like 10 writers in history. But they probably edited themselves before they even showed it to anybody. So, yeah, I know it's interesting because I look at a lot of sort of inside stories and have known a few people in Hollywood. And when you're talking, whenever I see that a script has gone through a lot of writers, I think, oh man, that's why that movie's so bad. But then sometimes you get the opposite. I just saw where Galaxy Quest was written by someone completely different, and they loved the idea, so they gave it to a writer they liked, and he rewrote it to basically what we see now. And one thing I think is, oh man, the guy who first wrote that must be really hard, but he probably got paid, so
Right.
No big deal. No big deal.
Well, should this ever become a movie, I would like to recognize it, right, from the original work, but I think that's down the road a bit.
You never know. So that's a question I have to get into. Is the play still in progressing? Words.
It's very close to final script and casted reading. So,
oh wow!
As of this moment, yeah, we're just right around the corner from, that would be like a year before the curtain went up. So we're counting down from that point. But as I said, we kind of have two bites of the apple because our book, if you get to the last page, I won't spoil it, but our book is the beginning of the play.
Oh, interesting. Okay. That's great. So it didn't really interfere with the play. It just is introducing the play.
No, not at all. Exactly. Great. And that's one of the weapons one has when one already knows what the play is going to be. Mm-hmm. And just look, I try to think of the end, and I generally write the middle chapter first. There's always one chapter where it's like, am I putting this down or am I going to finish it? Am I, is this going to get real or is this just going to keep bouncing along? Mm-hmm. And that's the chapter where you start turning it. And I generally write that one first, in terms of a full-on chapter, and then build from there backwards.
It's really good advice. Like I think most of what you said about writing, you had a plan. That's really good. Now I've actually seen some very famous writers talk about how they had no idea, and their characters write the book. That's what they say. But I don't know how they do that.
I can't do that.
Yeah, I don't know how they do that. I know people struggling with different scripts, and. Well, I know two different, they probably won't watch this far, so I can talk about them. I know two different documentary filmmakers. One of them has made several, and I think he's now got help, but as he went along, he would do it all himself, and he would write a script as he edited. So he would know what he's going to do with all this footage. And then I have another friend who's got more than 10 hours of footage and can't get the script out. So he can't and so that's... Having a plan, I think that is the key to any kind of writing.
Well, I could say this. I mean, we've thought about other books, and each one of them have a route. Each one of them have a map. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, and look, this is very much Lord of the Rings. You got to get to Mordor, Star Wars,
right.
et cetera. It's and now I'm going to forget. It's what Star Wars is based on. It's a Japanese movie. It's about some samurais, and again, they have this entire setup of good and evil and the hero's quest, basically.
Right, right. It's pretty ancient story.
Yeah.
All I remember about that is it was going to be one movie. And he wrote it as a movie, and then I think other people said, well, that's just too darn long. You can't do that as one. So he wrote the first movie thinking, oh, well, that's it. That's going to be my movie. Too bad he didn't get anywhere with that. Maybe next time. Maybe next time. I think I should let you get back to your day and wrap things up here. We've been talking for a good bit. I'm really glad you reached out. It's been awesome talking to you. I never know, for sure when I first start a podcast or start a phone call, what I'm going to get. And this has been great. This has been really enjoyable. So let me just say, you were listening to, were you still talking? This is Joel Albrecht, and I'm on my podcast. That was Miles Spencer. His book, A Line in the Sand, is available now wherever you get your books. This is available wherever you get your podcasts, but you must know that by now. Thanks so much for listening, and Miles, thanks a lot for coming on the show. You have a lot of wisdom to share. I really appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure, Joel. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, maybe we'll have to do another episode when you write your next book. Or when the play comes out. That would be great. All right. Take care, everyone. And be good to each other.